Sad billionaire dines alone on Christmas Eve, then a black waitress arrives. What if the richest man in the city spent Christmas Eve completely alone, sitting in an empty restaurant while the rest of the world celebrated with their loved ones? The snow fell steadily outside Rosewood Bistro as 42-year-old Theodore Blackwood adjusted his expensive tie for the third time that evening. His silver Bentley sat parked outside the nearly deserted restaurant, its engine still warm from the drive through the quiet holiday streets. Most places had closed early for Christmas Eve, but Theodore had specifically requested that this upscale establishment stay open just for him. Money could buy many things, including solitude on the most family-oriented night of the year. He'd been coming here every Christmas Eve for the past 5 years, ever since his divorce, sitting at the same corner table while staff reluctantly worked late to accommodate his unusual request. Tonight felt different, though, heavier somehow, as he stared at the empty chair across from him where laughter and conversation once lived. Where are you watching this story unfold from tonight? Theodore had built his technology empire from nothing, transforming a small software company into a billion-dollar corporation that employed thousands across the country. His penthouse apartment overlooked the city's twinkling lights, filled with expensive art and gadgets that most people could only dream of owning. Yet as he sat in the dimly lit restaurant, surrounded by empty tables set for families who were now home, unwrapping presents, none of those achievements seemed to matter. The divorce papers had been finalized exactly 5 years ago today. His ex-wife Miranda had taken their daughter, Sophia, to her mother's house in California, starting a tradition that left Theodore celebrating Christmas alone. "You love your work more than you love us," Miranda had said during their final argument. He'd protested at the time, but sitting here now, ordering the same expensive meal he ate every year, he wondered if she'd been right. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant confirming tomorrow's board meeting had been moved to accommodate the holiday. Even on Christmas Day, business called. Theodore scrolled through his contacts, looking for someone to call, someone who might want to share a drink or conversation. The list was long but felt completely empty. Business associates, investors, employees who probably felt obligated to answer if their boss called on Christmas Eve. The restaurant's manager, a nervous man in his 50s, approached the table with forced cheerfulness. "Mr. Blackwood, I hope everything is to your satisfaction this evening. The staff is wondering about our closing time tonight, given that it's Christmas Eve and all." "Of course," Theodore replied, glancing around at the few remaining employees who were trying to look busy while clearly wanting to go home to their families. "I'll just finish my meal." As the manager walked away, Theodore noticed him speaking quietly with a woman who had just arrived through the kitchen doors. She was tall and graceful, probably in her late 30s, wearing the restaurant's standard black uniform. Her name tag read, Celeste, and unlike the other staff members who avoided eye contact, she looked directly at his table with what seemed like genuine concern rather than annoyance. The other servers had been polite but distant during his previous visits, going through the motions of professional service while obviously wishing they were anywhere else. Theodore couldn't blame them, who wanted to work late on Christmas Eve to serve one lonely customer who could easily afford to eat at home. But there was something different about this woman's expression as she spoke with the manager. She nodded once, tied her apron more securely, and began walking toward his table with a warm smile that didn't look forced or rehearsed. "Good evening," she said as she approached. "I'm Celeste, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. I know it's getting late, but please don't feel rushed. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when the world gets quiet." Her voice carried a gentle southern accent, and her eyes held a kindness that Theodore hadn't experienced in a business setting for longer than he could remember. For the first time in years, he found himself genuinely curious about another person rather than simply going through the motions of social interaction. Something about this unexpected encounter was about to change everything. Celeste refilled Theodore's water glass with practiced ease, but her movements had a gracefulness that suggested this was more than just another serving job. "I haven't seen you here before," she said, though her tone suggested she somehow knew this wasn't his first Christmas Eve at Rosewood Bistro. "Are you visiting family in town?" Theodore found himself hesitating, unused to personal questions that weren't about business deals or profit margins. "Actually, this is something of a tradition for me. Spending Christmas Eve here." He gestured vaguely at the empty restaurant. Not exactly festive, I know. Traditions are important, Celeste replied thoughtfully, straightening the unnecessary place setting across from him. Even the quiet ones. Sometimes, especially the quiet ones. She paused, studying his face with surprising directness. Though I'm guessing this particular tradition wasn't exactly your first choice. The observation caught Theodore off guard. Most people, especially service workers, kept conversations light and superficial around him. His wealth and position typically created an invisible barrier that prevented genuine interaction. But Celeste seemed unimpressed by his expensive suit or the fact that he'd rented out an entire restaurant for the evening. My daughter lives in California now, he found himself saying, surprised by his own honesty. Has for the past 5 years. My ex-wife remarried a teacher who apparently knows how to build sandcastles and attend school plays. The words came out more bitter than he'd intended. Celeste nodded slowly, refilling his coffee cup, which he hadn't realized was empty. Those are important skills, she said simply. But so is providing for your family, working hard to give them opportunities. Sometimes life makes us choose between different kinds of love. Theodore looked up sharply, expecting pity or judgment, but found neither in her expression. You sound like you speak from experience. I have a son, Celeste replied, her voice growing softer. 15 years old now. His father wasn't around much when he was little, always chasing the next big opportunity, the next promotion that would make everything better for us. I used to be angry about all those missed bedtime stories and soccer games. She wiped down an already clean section of the table. Took me years to understand he was showing love the only way he knew how. The restaurant had grown even quieter, with most of the staff now gathered in the kitchen, waiting for permission to leave. Theodore realized he was keeping people from their Christmas Eve plans, but for some reason, Celeste didn't seem in any hurry to rush him out. Do you think it's too late? Theodore asked suddenly. To learn different ways? Celeste smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Honey, I've seen people completely reinvent themselves at 80. At 42. Somehow she'd guessed his age. You've got plenty of time to write new chapters. As she spoke, Theodore felt something shift inside his chest, like a door he'd kept locked for years was finally beginning to creak open. For the first time since sitting down, he wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or board meetings. Instead, he was remembering Sophia's laugh and wondering what she was doing right now in California. If this moment of unexpected connection is touching your heart, please give this story a thumbs up. The warmth in Celeste's eyes suggested she understood exactly what he was feeling, and that somehow, this chance encounter might be exactly what both of them needed on this lonely Christmas Eve. Theodore pushed his barely touched dinner around his plate, his appetite completely forgotten. The worst part is that she stopped calling, he said quietly, surprised to find himself sharing something so personal with this stranger. Sophia used to call me every Sunday when she first moved to California. We'd talk for maybe 10 minutes about school, her friends, and little things. But over the years, those calls got shorter, and then they just stopped. Celeste leaned against the empty chair across from him, her expression filled with understanding rather than judgment. How old was she when they moved? 8. The number felt heavy in Theodore's mouth. She's 13 now. I send birthday presents, Christmas gifts, but everything goes through Miranda's lawyers. I don't even know if Sophia gets them, or if she thinks I just forgot about her completely. Oh honey, Celeste said softly, and Theodore was startled to see genuine pain in her eyes for his situation. 13 is such a hard age. Everything feels permanent when you're that age, even things that aren't. The restaurant's kitchen had gone almost completely quiet now. Through the service window, Theodore could see staff members checking their watches and whispering among themselves. He started to reach for his wallet, feeling guilty for keeping everyone so late, but Celeste gently waved him away. My son Marcus went through something similar with his father, she continued, settling into the chair across from him as if they were old friends having coffee. When Marcus was about 10, his dad moved to Atlanta for work. promised he'd visit every month, call every week. But life got complicated, and those promises got harder to keep. Theodore found himself leaning forward, genuinely interested in her story rather than just being polite. What happened? For about 3 years, Marcus built up this wall of anger. Wouldn't talk about his father, acted like he didn't care when Father's Day came around. I thought maybe it was better that way, you know? Clean break, less disappointment. Celeste's voice grew quiet. But then one day, I found him crying in his room, holding this old baseball his father had given him when he was little. Turns out, all that anger was just hurt wearing a disguise. The parallel to his own situation hit Theodore like a physical blow. He'd assumed Sophia's silence meant she'd moved on, found happiness with her stepfather, forgotten about the father who'd missed too many school plays and birthday parties because of board meetings and business trips. Did they reconnect? Theodore asked, and he could hear the desperate hope in his own voice. Celeste smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Marcus's father passed away 2 years ago. Heart attack. But before that happened, yes, they found their way back to each other. It took patience, and it took his father learning to love differently than he had before, but they had 3 good years together before the end. The weight of lost time settled on Theodore's shoulders like a heavy coat. 5 years of Christmas mornings without his daughter's laughter. 5 years of wondering if she'd grown taller, if she still loved the funny voices he used to do when reading her bedtime stories, if she even remembered those stories at all. Have you ever felt the weight of time slipping away with someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. But as he looked at Celeste's encouraging expression, Theodore began to wonder if it might not be too late to build something new from the pieces of what he'd lost. What if she doesn't want to hear from me? Theodore asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What if 5 years of silence means she's better off without me? Celeste reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm and calloused from years of work, a stark contrast to his soft, manicured hands that had never known physical labor. Honey, I can't answer that for you. But I can tell you that every night when I tuck Marcus in, yes, even at 15, he still lets his mama tuck him in sometimes. He talks about the future. The job he wants, the girl he likes, the places he wants to travel. And you know what? Every single one of those dreams includes having people who love him witness them. Theodore felt his throat tighten. Sophia used to do that. When she was little, she'd plan our adventures for when she grew up. We were going to climb mountains and swim with dolphins and eat ice cream for breakfast in Paris. Those dreams don't just disappear, Celeste said firmly. They might change shape, but they don't disappear. And neither does the love that created them. The manager appeared at their table, clearly uncomfortable about interrupting but equally uncomfortable about keeping his staff so late. Mr. Blackwood, I'm so sorry, but we really do need to close now. The kitchen staff has families waiting. Of course, Theodore said quickly, starting to stand. I'm sorry I kept everyone so late. But Celeste remained seated, looking directly at the manager with quiet authority. James, could you give us just 5 more minutes? I promise we'll be quick. The manager looked confused but nodded, retreating back to the kitchen. Theodore stared at her in amazement. How did you? Honey, I've been working in restaurants for 15 years, Celeste said with a small smile. I know how to handle managers who are all bluster and no backbone. Besides, James knows I'm usually the one pushing to leave early, so if I'm asking for more time, it must be important. Theodore realized this was the longest conversation he'd had with another person in months that wasn't about profit margins or market projections. Why are you doing this? Staying late, listening to a stranger complain about his failures. Celeste stood up and began clearing his untouched plate. Because 5 years ago, on Christmas Eve, I was working at a diner downtown. Dead broke, behind on rent, wondering if I was failing Marcus by not being able to give him the Christmas other kids get. A man in an expensive suit came in around midnight, ordered coffee he didn't drink, and left a $500 tip with a note that said, "For better dreams." Theodore's breath caught in his throat. He remembered that night, remembered the tired waitress with kind eyes, remembered feeling moved by her gentle treatment of a difficult customer at the next table. "I never forgot that kindness," Celeste continued. "It paid our rent that month and reminded me that people can surprise you when you least expect it. Sometimes we get exactly what we need, exactly when we need it." The realization hit Theodore like a thunderbolt. This wasn't a coincidence, this was grace, delivered by someone who understood both loneliness and hope. If you've been touched by this story of unexpected connections, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales like this one. Everything was about to change, and for the first time in 5 years, Theodore wasn't afraid of change. Theodore pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "I don't even know what time it is in California," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's 9 o'clock there," Celeste replied gently. "Perfect time for a Christmas Eve call." For a moment, Theodore just stared at his daughter's number on the screen. It had been so long since he'd called directly instead of going through lawyers and intermediaries. What if she didn't answer? What if she did answer but didn't want to talk? "What do I say?" he asked. "Start with 'I love you,'" Celeste suggested. "Everything else will follow." Theodore took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Just as he was about to hang up, a voice he barely recognized answered. "Dad." Sophia's voice was deeper now, more mature, but there was something in the way she said that one word that told Theodore everything he needed to know. She hadn't forgotten him. She'd been waiting for this call just as much as he'd been afraid to make it. "Hi, sweetheart," Theodore managed, tears beginning to blur his vision. "I know it's been too long, and I know I have no right to call out of the blue like this, but I needed you to know something. I love you, Sophia. I've loved you every single day for the past 5 years, and I'm so sorry I didn't know how to show it better." "Dad, I missed you too," Sophia replied, and Theodore could hear tears in her young voice. "I kept thinking maybe you forgot about me, or maybe you were too busy with work to think about us anymore." "Never," Theodore said firmly. "I was scared and stupid and didn't know how to be the kind of father you deserved, but I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment." They talked for 45 minutes. About school, about friends, about the guitar lessons Sophia had started, about the business Theodore was learning to leave at the office. She told him about her stepfather, who was indeed good at sandcastles and school plays, but who also told her regularly that having multiple people love you was always better than having fewer. When they finally hung up, with plans for Theodore to visit California for New Year's and for Sophia to spend part of spring break with him, Theodore realized that Celeste had quietly disappeared. On the table where she'd been sitting was a small note written on restaurant stationery. "Some gifts come disguised as ordinary moments. Merry Christmas, Theodore. A friend." The restaurant was empty now, except for James the manager, who was waiting patiently by the door with Theodore's coat. "Sir, Celeste asked me to tell you that she hopes you and your daughter have beautiful adventures together." Theodore walked outside into the gently falling snow, feeling lighter than he had in years. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Dad, I kept that old photo of us building a snowman in our backyard. I've been saving it for when we could build another one together." As he drove home through the quiet Christmas Eve streets, Theodore smiled through his tears. Sometimes the most important gifts came not wrapped in expensive paper, but in the form of unexpected kindness from a stranger who understood exactly what your heart needed to hear. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share your own thoughts about second chances in the comments below, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Thank you for joining us on this Christmas Eve journey. May your holidays be filled with love, hope, and beautiful new beginnings.